Hello and welcome to Creative Momentum with Meg. This is the home season, season 2, where I speak to Australian creatives. Today's guest is Kerry Jewell, who is a writer and a nuclear medicine physician. She has a debut novel that came out, I think, last week called A Little Unwell, and it's a darkly funny novel. In our conversation, we talk about dark humour from doctors and people in the medical world. We talk about how she does her creative work, how driving in the car is a place for her to allow ideas to percolate, and how she doesn't have a routine at all. In fact, when she tries to have a routine, it wrecks it. So let's get into it, and I will see you on the other side. Welcome to Creative Momentum with Meg, Kerry. It's nice to have you here. Can you start by just introducing yourself and what you do creatively?
Thank you so much for having me, Meg. This is my first time on a creative podcast ever, so excited to be here. I'm a writer and a nuclear medicine physician, so during the day I'm working in the hospital, not every day, but that's my day job. And the other parts of my life, I'm a writer, so I've been doing that for quite a while, but we're just coming up to the launch of my first book, A Little Unwell. So that's occupying the majority of my writing life at the moment.
Excellent. I met you, I think, a few years back. Maybe I can't even remember whose book launch it was. And I, we kind of bonded over, my son was studying medicine, and we chatted about that. And I've actually met quite a few doctors who are writers. Do you think there's something in that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's probably lots of smarter, more eloquent academic reasoning behind it that I do not have access to at this time of the morning. But I think just at a common sense level, people who are attracted to medicine, I think, have a lot of the same qualities as what makes good artists and writers. So I think that's a good starting point. And then I think the very nature of what we're seeing every day in medicine probably requires some sort of outlet for expression or for processing. So it's quite unsurprising to me that so many of us would end up writing.
Mm, yeah, I've always been curious about that, because it does seem like there are a lot of doctors who have turned their hand to writing fiction. Tell me, Kerry, do you have a routine for your writing?
Absolutely not. And I think any attempt to try to create a routine just makes it so much worse. Uh, I don't write every day. I don't write in the same spot, although the place that I am most comfortable and probably get the most work done is writing in bed. But I have no routine. When it comes to me, it comes to me. And I'm not someone that can write a lot in one day, usually. I know some people can write thousands of words, and I'm just in awe of them. I'd really love to know what their special sauce is, because I just can't do that. So normally I do a little bit of writing when the inspiration strikes me, but I think my most regular process, if I had one, was the thinking time that I use. It takes me about an hour in the car to get to work, and I find myself driving around country Victoria quite a lot as well. And I think a lot of the processing and the figuring out, that's where I do it best.
And so when you arrive then, because I love understanding the way people work as well, the process of their, creativity. So do you start the drive going, oh, I need to think about, how I get X to, this place, or not this problem that I've come up with, or is it just floating around
No, I
already?
think often when I start a drive, I'm not even thinking about those problems. In fact, I mean, I'm not someone that's ever been particularly good at meditation or yoga or those sorts of practices, but I think probably the closest I come in my life is to that sort of mental state is when I'm in the car with music on and I just sort of drift away. Uh, with enough executive function to still drive the car, of course, just in case there's anyone from Vic
Yeah.
Road on or Vic Police.
She's still concentrating.
Totally legit and fine. No accidents, perfect record. Gosh, I'm incriminating myself, aren't I? No, so I think that once I put the music on, it just sort of takes me away. So not every day I'm thinking about writing in the car. Probably most days I am though. And it depends what music's playing. So for A Little Unwell, it was a lot of 90s and early 2000s alternative rock, and also some 70s bangers as well. But it just depends what the mood of the day is, what the music is, where I'm driving, what the weather's like. I think the weather is a huge influence as well. And then it's not something I'm consciously aware of. I'll just, something will come to me. And they're probably little problems with plot or character that have been working away in my subconscious for a little while, and they just kind of bubble up to the surface, and that's really helpful. And so when I get to my destination, it's 50-50 whether I've remembered what bolts of lightning have come to me over the course of the journey, but either write them down in a scrap bit of paper. Again, not organized. If I had some notebooks or journals, that would be helpful. Probably something I should invest in moving forward. But scrap bit of paper or a loose note on my phone. I tried doing voice notes for a while, but the technology's probably got the better of me. And so, it's easier just try to retain it in short-term memory and then pour it out once the car is parked and turned off, because I am not touching my phone while I'm driving Vic Police, just to be clear.
You mentioned something about music, and I'm also curious about that. So when I'm writing, I tend to try and listen to music that's specific to the thing that I'm writing about. So when I was writing my historical fiction, I was listening to music that was set in that time because I wanted to just kind of throw my head into that space. Do you use music in the same way? Like, is it a curated list that you are listening to when you're writing your books?
So when I'm actually writing, I don't listen to anything at all. In fact, the closest I would come to, as I said, most of the writing I do at home or in bed. Sometimes when I'm in a bit of a rut, my friend Zach and I go to the State Library, often on a Sunday morning, and sit there and just do the thing. And that's a good way to break bad habits and get back into the action of writing. And that might be the only time that I will play something if it's particularly noisy in the library that morning. And usually there's a sleep podcast that I've got saved on my phone, and it's just no lyrics, just background music, and it's kind of just to dull out the noise in the background. But my choice, my preference is not to have music or any distracting sounds. Particularly at home.
Yeah. I think words, songs with words can really get in the way for writing. I can only listen to, instrumental if I am listening. Tell me from where or who or what do you get your inspiration for your writing?
Yeah, look, that's a hard question to answer because, again, I guess it's not something I'm super conscious of. I've always written from the time I was a kid all the way through. This is the first time I've attempted a full length or finished a full length novel before. But back when I was in high school and primary school and in university, I was writing short stories or non-fiction pieces. And I think if I had to narrow it down, probably a unifying theme, I think, would be injustice. That seems to be a little trigger for me that gets me writing. Beauty as well. I'm really inspired by the natural world. I think it's probably no coincidence that I grew up in a creative family. We had a photography business growing up, so I spent a lot of time as a kid either out on shoots and when I say out on shoots, mainly just holding the reflector. So it was very big and I was very short. So I wasn't seeing a lot when I was behind the reflector. But certainly doing that and then seeing the images coming back in. And I was really fortunate to be taken to a lot of art galleries and other, had a lot of creative outlet growing up. So I think that probably got my eye in and has inspired me as well. So I think all of that comes into the mix. And humour. Sometimes you hear something like just a snippet of conversation, or you see a headline on Reddit or elsewhere on the internet, and then it's like a firing gun. It just goes off, and then the inspiration starts spiraling away, and I have to get it down. So yeah, again, no routine. Sometimes those moments just happen. You have to go with them.
Mm. So with A Little Unwell, what was the inspiration for that one?
I have a very clear memory of this. I was a second year resident, which means I'd finished university 2 years beforehand and was working in the hospital. And I was on night shift and I was covering a number of medical specialties at a hospital here in Melbourne, which will remain unnamed. And I had this really silly situation where, as happens quite often in hospital, I had an admin problem, and that was that I was covering a service where an elderly patient had died, and it was an expected death. Patient was in their 90s, but they'd been admitted under one team, and this was back when a lot of the notes were still handwritten. I couldn't read the admission note, or the majority of the admission note. And there were a few factors about the case that made me unsure about whether I needed to report it to the coroner or not. And the patient had been transferred to another team's care, I think in less than 24 hours before the patient died, which meant that it was really murky as to who I would need to escalate to if I needed to ask the questions to help me fill out the death form, the death certificate form. And it wasn't helped by, it was after midnight. I think it was probably like 2 or 3 a.m. You're a few nights into back then we often did 7 nights on, 7 nights off. And so by the time it's getting later in the week, you're getting a little bit delirious. The body's not meant to function particularly well at that time of night. So there were all these factors feeding in, and it just became the most ridiculous situation. And I ended up calling the helpline for the state coroner's office to ask for some advice, and they were very helpful, and it resolved the issue. But I was sitting there in the doctor's office afterwards, stewing a little bit because, my pager was empty. There was nothing else to do. I didn't have a distraction. And I was just sitting there ruminating about how silly that whole process was, and how much time I'd lost, and how if one, there'd been a printed admission note, which I think probably happens the majority of the time now. It's probably mostly electronic across our health system, although not everywhere. If it had been typed, if it had been written clearly, what had taken me probably a couple of hours by that point could have been resolved very quickly in 15 minutes. The opportunity cost of what I could have been doing or who I could have been helping with that lost time. So I was just stewing on it. And in the end, I was like, you know what, I'm going to vent this out a little bit. I'm just going to chuck it in a Word document so that I can move on with my shift. And so I did. I reckon it would have been 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I just chucked it in a Word document, saved it, moved on. And then I came back to it. I can't remember exactly when I came back to it, whether it was the next day or after I'd finished that run of shifts. And I just remember looking at it and being like, oh, that's funny. That's very funny. And I could build a whole story around this because I've got plenty of these anecdotes that would all go together. So that's how it started. And I think back at the start, yeah, I was making a habit of trying to write down all of these type of scenarios, because I guess the message I was trying to get across at that stage was, look how inefficient this is. Look how silly this is. Like, there are so many things that we could be doing to make this work so much better. And then everyone would be having a much, much better time. But then as I started to string it together, the characters started to form and the plot started to come together. And that's when I knew I needed to make more of it.
Had you set out thinking I'm writing a story here, or was it just like, did you already have a writing practice at that point?
At that stage, I had, so that was back in 2015. At that stage, I wasn't writing regularly. I had done a few short stories, but I really think over the end of university, I stopped focusing on fiction and was writing a bit more, probably more often in non-fiction. I was a publication officer for our medical student magazine and, you know, probably was doing a few little opinion pieces and things, or a lot of academic writing as well. And that has been a feature across my whole career, writing journal articles and, yeah, other bits of academic writing. But as I said, I never set out to complete a whole novel before. And I think in the beginning, when I was looking at these vignettes, I wasn't exactly sure what to do with them. It manifested the following year in a professionalism project I was doing for the Postgraduate Medical Council of Victoria, where I was writing a few short scenarios to use as prompts for group discussions about complex professionalism topics. So that was sort of like a side quest that popped up as a result of this. But yeah, I don't, it was at some point in 2015 I knew that I had enough, that I should pursue a novel with it. But the scene I'm talking about is in the book, and I think it features towards the end of chapter 7. So I had to go back and start and build the story up behind it. I couldn't just jump in there.
Mm-hmm. So you started with all these different little vignettes.
Yeah, I think a lot of what I was working with at the time has stayed in, but it was, I didn't have the quintessential board with all the red string moving between everything. And I didn't have any organized note system at all. And in fact, I've spoken about the fact that uh, for many years, because it took, that this started in 2015 and I didn't finish the first complete draft until 2022. I have so many saved documents in the back of my computer, and I don't know what lost gold is in there, because the process would be writing things out on loose notes and then maybe transferring them to a Word document or the Notes app on my phone, and then that getting out of control over the space of a month or so, and then me saving it, like cutting and pasting it into a Word document and being like, April 2026, the best notes ever. This will definitely be the book. And then never opening that document again. So I think I had to go through that process a few times to get all the different thoughts out. Like that's, when inspiration strikes and you get on a bit of a run, you're just kind of pouring out that stream of thought. So I did quite a lot of that back at the start. And I'm doing it again now. I've actually lost track of your original question.
No, you were talking about, where you get your ideas from and how it kind of cobbles together. But also I was curious about whether you started this thinking it was going to be a work of fiction, or it was just, I need to get this stuff out of my head, and I'm going to, like, this made me curious. I'm just going to write this down.
Yeah, no, I think it was important. I think I recognized at the time that the experiences I was having was important and that I should try to write them down, and write them down immediately, because your mind starts to change things if you leave it too long. So I wanted to write them down raw. So I had the raw story, but I'm not someone that's ever really kept a diary. Mainly because I knew that if I read, what I'd said 15 years ago, I'm like, oh man, you're so immature. Like, you so didn't get it. And I didn't know if my ego could handle it. But no, so I've never really kept a diary, but I have, when things have happened that have been important, I've tried to make a little note of it, because they are the sort of things I'm sure I would like to return to. So that's where it started. Maybe I thought that I could do something in the non-fiction space with it originally, but I've said this a few times. I think sometimes truth is easier to tell in fiction, and that's what led me to package it this way, because I think the themes and hopefully some of the life lessons that are in this book are better articulated in the fiction world.
And you touched on the humour of it. Does humour allow you to, because you've also touched on, the importance of social justice for you, or injustice. Does humour allow that to allow you as a writer to talk about things that feel unjust?
I think so, yes. I may have mentioned this even to you the last time we spoke, but one of the most startling things I discovered when I got the judging notes for the Richell Prize, and I should mention this is how this novel project has progressed. It was the first 3 chapters were shortlisted for the Richell Prize that Hachette and the Emerging Writers Festival present back in 2020. And the judging notes were praising the dark humour. And this was during COVID, so I didn't unfortunately get to go up to Sydney and be in the room as they were doing it all. So I was kind of just sitting at home with my laptop watching YouTube. Actually, Hachette had sent a beautiful little box full of little nibbles. So I was sitting there eating my little nibbles, and then they said, "Oh, praise the dark humour." I'm sitting there being like, "Oh gosh, I thought that was just humour." So that started like this whole process of being like, "Oh wow, how dark was it really? How dark is too dark?" And I've spent a bit of time thinking about that in the 5 years since. I think it's so necessary. I think there's so much that's happening in the world at the moment that is so far beyond what should be reasonable or rational that we're a bit numb to it. I was reading an article over the weekend that was talking about occupational violence in hospitals, and it was describing nurses being bashed and spat on.
God.
And I read past it and then had to stop and come back and be like, that is truly horrible. Like that should just be stopping everyone in their tracks when they read that. Like no one should be able to read past that for, having to stop and really think about it. But we do. There's things like that we read past or look past or hear past every day. When it's funny though, or if it's framed in a joke, I do wonder if that catches a bit more attention. And also, it's soothing. I think this is a very well established and understood thing that healthcare workers do use a lot of dark humor because it helps. Because if you took everything seriously at face value all the time, you'd burn out so quickly. The moral injury that you would be experiencing every shift would be too high. So the humor is a bit of a vent as well.
And does your creative practice help you keep a balance between your working life and life in general?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have the fortune of having finished my training now. I've been a consultant for 3 years, so I have a bit more autonomy over my life, which means that I am not working full time at the moment, and that is a work-life balance that works better for me. I imagine in the years to come, I might take on some more work again, but I've just come through a bit of a weird period of sick leave too. So I'm trying to take it as an opportunity to reset things and structure my life in a way that is more conducive to fun and, well, mainly just fun. But prior to that, I was working full time and a lot of overtime as well. And those couple of years, thinking of 2023 in particular, where I was working like that, that's the least amount of writing I have done in the last 10 years. When I was working really, really hard, I just was, you'd come home at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night and there's nothing left in the tank. And I'm not someone that is particularly productive first thing in the morning in a creative way. I can get up and clean the house or go and run errands, but I usually am not in a good creative space first thing in the morning. So those years of working really, really hard, I was not writing very much and I wasn't as happy. I am certainly happier the more creative things I get to do. And that leaves me fresher to go into the hospital and do my medical work in a much more productive and focused way. It allows me to show up and be a better colleague as well. I think that's something that is a little bit under-recognized. Well, I was going to say under-recognized. I think we recognize that we maybe just don't have a good system for dealing with it. But the way you go into the hospital and do your job can have a direct impact on how good a day the people around you are having as well. So I think it's part of my duty to go in as fresh and inspired and helpful and happy as possible, to have that knock-on effect for the people around me. And I hope in turn that is contributing to better patient care, because that's the key point. Everything that we're doing should be about patient-centered care. They're the focus. So all of these things, even in writing this book, that's the goal in mind.
I love that so much, that, the idea that doing your creative work is helping you to care for patients even more. And, it's something that I, when I'm working with writers, the point that they discover that awareness that actually they need to do their creative work because it makes them be a better person in every other part of their lives.
Yeah, it's good for the soul. It's really good for the soul.
Yeah. So you're writing something new now.
Yes.
Or being playful with it. I won't get you to talk about that, because I think, hold it close while you need to.
All I will say, the only hint I will give is that one of my passions in life is 90s natural disaster films. So that is where I'm sitting currently. That is the only hint I can give.
Excellent. And is there a doctor in there?
There may be. What I will say is I don't want to get typecast as only being able to write about doctors, or for anyone to think that I think doctors are so important that they should be the main character of every story, because that is not true. Absolutely not. But doctors are funny, and I do like to write funny. So at this stage, I feel like, yes, there may be a doctor character in there. They may not be the main character. We'll see.
Excellent. You said something earlier about being shortlisted for the Richell. How important do you think it is to submit your work out to prizes, competitions, etc.?
Oh, so important. So up until 2019, I had really just been writing fiction for myself. It had been a long time since I submitted anything for, in fact, I don't think I had submitted anything really fiction-y since high school. So I had been writing it for me. And by the end of 2019, I had nearly 2/3 of this novel written. And I thought I better start taking it a bit more seriously. I think I need some outside perspective about whether this has legs, whether I should be doing something more, or if I just keep it as a personal hobby for myself. So I did what all good medical people do, which is going and seeking a mentor. And I did that through the Monash University Alumni Network. I thought, I have had mentors in medicine before. Why not find a writing mentor? So I think at the time you put into their little search engine what you were hoping to find. And straight away I connected with the lovely Melbourne-based writer, Sarah Miles. And so we connected up in 2019, and I started having, I guess, some informal mentoring or coaching sessions with her. And, I have to credit her with opening up my whole world in terms of the writing space, or just actually my whole world in general. She introduced me to Writers Victoria, ASA, the writing community here in Melbourne. And that was right as COVID was breaking at the start of 2020. Which in some ways was sad, because it was a while before I could get out and go to events for the first time. The first Melbourne book event I ever went to was Mandy Beaumont's launch for the Furies, which was amazing. It was like going and meeting a rock star. And I remember coming home being so buzzed and my partner being like, okay, all right, this is going to be consuming a lot of your life. Let's get into it. But before that, over that first, particularly the first year of the pandemic lockdown, back when Twitter was still far more functional for the writing community, I participated in Writing Victoria's April competition with the short fiction, the flash fiction.
It was one of those things where you had to put something in each, or you could do something each day.
Yeah, 30 days basically of like a little, Twitter-sized little story. So I started doing that, and immediately I started connecting up with other writers in Victoria who were doing the same things. Because again, this is back when Twitter was not so much of a cesspool and hashtags worked. And yeah, it just kind of grew from there. So the first person I ever met off the internet was Zach Pryor, who I'd met through the Writers Victoria April comp. And I remember going and meeting him in a rooftop bar in Melbourne and not getting attacked or murdered. So that raised my confidence in meeting people via the internet, which was lovely. Not that I think, Melbourne writing community is very murder obsessed, but I don't think murder participating. I think that's, a clear statement that should be made.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, so these are all these lovely things that just started happening as a result of opening up rather than just keeping the writing to myself. And it was a long time before I actually showed Sarah any of my writing. I had finished the manuscript and employed her to do a proper professional manuscript review on it. I think that was the first time I actually gave her any of my writing. So it was more about getting to know the writing community and who I was as a writer and what I could do to improve my skills. So coming back to your original question, yes, I think that was very important, because had I not gained that confidence from meeting Sarah in 2019, I wouldn't have felt confident to put my work up for the Richell Prize in 2020. I think it was July 2020 that I submitted it. And then I wouldn't have had the privilege of being shortlisted. I think there were about 800 entries that year, and mine got in the top 5. And that was a huge surprise. I'll never forget getting the phone call from Vanessa, and I was at work. And I went and did a little celebratory dance in the side office, and then I had to go and be very serious again in the hospital environment. But the whole time I was just like, oh man, it's happening. But to be clear, that was 2020, and it is now 6 years later, because that is the time frame we work on in writing.
Yeah, I think, how good to talk about that, because that's the reality of writing. It takes a long time. You started writing this in 2015 and it's coming out this year, or this month.
Yeah.
So that's A Little Unwell, which we can see behind you as well, which is gorgeous cover. Tell me, if you were to be talking to someone who is having a wobbly moment about their creative work, or is at the beginning of it, what wisdom would you want to share with them?
This is not something I've really prepared an answer for or thought about, but I guess I would give advice in a same vein as to what I think about. I could apply this to a lot of topics in life, is that it's all made up. So if you've had critical feedback on some of your writing, or it's not going as well as you want it to be, or you just, you're not even getting feedback, you're just not getting anywhere, maybe it's helpful to remember that it's all made up. And people who are giving you opinions, it's very changeable. What I'm even saying to you in this podcast today, would I be able to repeat these answers the same if you asked me these same things tomorrow? You'd be getting something completely different. And I think that's worth remembering. I'm very lucky that I've had, even though it's taken a long time, a pretty straight shot through to getting published, because as soon as I got shortlisted for the Richell Prize, Hachette got first look at my finished manuscript. And then I've also been supported by a literary agent, Tom at A4. And I really hadn't submitted to too many literary agents before that relationship was formed. But that was pretty lucky, because I think all of those people involved had some sort of personal connection to the work. And I may have been able to be writing the exact same writing style, but on a non-medical book, and it might not have connected or resonated, and I might not be a published author. I probably wouldn't be a published author at this stage. So I think that's important to remember, that it is all made up, and as long as you are happy and confident in what you're doing and are finding joy in it, then there's value there. And even if it doesn't get published, if you've had fun and it's enriched your life in some way, then there's value there. But does it even have to provide value? I don't think it does. So I don't know. I'm really not qualified to answer this question. I think there are far more experienced authors and mentors and motivational speakers who have far more eloquent and thought through answers to this question, who will probably be more helpful in inspiring you through your writing journey. But I think just as a person, it's all made up. Let's just be kind to one another and try to enjoy our art. I think it can be that simple.
I love that. I love the simplicity of that as well. That actually, I will challenge that you need to be more. I don't know. Have been doing it for longer, because I think we all have wisdom to share along the way. So thank you for sharing that, Kerry. Tell me, what is home for you and your creative work? What does that mean for you?
As I mentioned before, nature is probably where I get a lot of inspiration. I'm from Northeast Victoria, and so going out into the bush and smelling the smells and seeing the sights, particularly golden hour light breaking over a western horizon. Whatever nonsense I've experienced for the week, whatever silly arguments or things that haven't quite worked out at work, or bad experiences, or noise from the internet, and there is a lot of noise at the moment. Not to diminish all of the important and serious things that are happening around the world, but at the level of the internet or what you're consuming via social media, there's so much noise, and that really clouds my ability to see the creative process clearly. I feel like I start to get my wires all mixed up and wondering what it's all for and whether it's important, and whether my voice should even be out there, or if I'm just adding to the cacophony. But then taking a walk in nature and just letting that kind of seep out, like to make a really clunky medical analogy, I guess, just letting the venom seep out of a wound, or the poison come out of a wound, or something, something in that space. Again, yeah. I could be more eloquent if we were having this conversation in 6 hours' time, and I'd probably woken up. I think just letting all of that tension drain out on a walk in nature is really, really helpful. So I guess that's one of the other things I do. The driving is good for inspiration and connecting up neural pathways that needed to fire together, that hadn't quite made the conscious connections when I was sitting in bed trying to write. But letting the tension go and just feeling the environment around me out in nature, I think that's where the creative juice really bubbles.
I love that so much, because for me, home is always a eucalypt tree. Kind of doesn't matter where it is. If I'm smelling it and seeing it, I feel everything else melts away.
Yeah, 100%. Actually, I lived in England for a year in 2012, and I will never forget the feeling of coming back into Melbourne and getting in the car to head up the Hume to head home, and just appreciating the burnt landscape and how dry everything was, and the eucalypt, and just the totally different lightscape to what it is in the UK. Like, yeah, it's that sense of familiarity and returning home.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kerry. I will put links to your beautiful book, A Little Unwell. When's it coming out? What's the date?
It's coming out the 28th of April, which is Tuesday, I think Tuesday, 28th of April. It's a big publishing day, so there are lots of other exciting titles coming out that day. So even if I have bored you to tears and you think I'm, let's be honest, a bit of a wanker as a result of this conversation, that's fine. There are plenty of other talented people that have books coming out the same day.
Kerry, I'm going to say I am not going to agree with what you just said. Having had lots of conversations with you over time, I am so looking forward to reading A Little Unwell, and I am sure that your humour is going to shine on the page.
Or deeply disturb you into night. Like either or. We don't really know at this stage. So,
no, but I love a bit of dark humour.
I apologise if anyone has sleeping issues as a result of reading this.
Excellent. Thank you for coming on the show, and yeah, thanks for all of your insights.
Thanks so much for having me, Meg. And thank you for being so gentle and kind for my first ever creative podcast experience. It's been lovely.
Excellent. I'm sure you're going to have many more podcast moments over your writing career.
We'll see. Thank you.
I really hope you enjoyed that conversation with Kerry. I love chatting with her, and I've always loved catching up with her at various book launches and whatnot, so it's great to know that her book is out in the world. Sadly, I haven't been able to get hold of it yet because I am on the other side of the world, literally. I am in Germany at the moment and working from over here for various reasons. If you... all of the links to Kerry, how you can find her, how you can find her book, that's all in the show notes, of course. I would love you to go and give the show a bit of a thumbs up or like, a rating, whatever, on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And, leave a comment in the show notes reflecting on what you got out of the show out of this episode, and whether Kerry's process for working resonates with you. If you really like the show, there is a tip jar in the show notes page, and every contribution just helps me continue to do the work of this podcast, even if it's just getting myself a little cup of coffee every couple of months. Thank you to Yvonne Morton, who has done the music for this season, and you can find her on Bandcamp or on Instagram, or both. The EOI for the podcast is still open. I'm still interested in hearing from people who maybe are not writers, because we've been hearing from a lot of writers lately. I'm curious to hear from other creatives, and that can be a really broad idea of what it is to be a creative, because all of it is really interesting for anyone who is interested in creative work. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to bringing the next episode to you in a week's time. Until next time, keep building your own creative momentum. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to Meg Dunley on Creative Momentum with Meg. See you later.